1. And we're up. Hey, people. Iggy here. This is welcome back to TENGRIDOME, and this is going to be a very kind of rambly sort of very buzzy kind of type of deal where we gush about Usyk's performance immediately, basically a day after the fight, and for that purpose, I am joined by the Fight Site founder and boxing historian Kyle McLachlan, also known as Flea Boxing and Combat Chronicles, and previously, what was your previous handle?
Polgas Boxer. I completely forgot about that. It's been like 6 months since I used that.
That one's gone.
Yeah, Combat Chronicles now. Yeah, it's Combat CHR on Twitter. Follow me. No one does anymore. So
yeah, and a very special guest appearance by Lukasz Fenrych, who Polski genius and crafty boxing on Twitter.
Crafty boxing
and Polish genius for people who follow me on other boxing sites and stuff. So I'm all over. Thanks for
the man.
Anyway, so just not to faff about for too long. What are your impressions, fellas? How are we feeling about that victory by Oleksandr Usyk? What do you think about the performance? Very quickly, off the cuff.
Not bad at all.
Pretty
Not
good.
bad.
Pretty good.
One might say that Oleksandr Usyk understands this boxing thing. He's pretty decent at it.
He's quite good, yeah.
I think he understands. Yeah, he's as he said after the fight. I'm sure we've not seen the best of him, but I failed to see how much better he can get. But
To be completely honest, I was kind of let down a bit by that performance against Chisora, but then again, Chisora is a fridge and a very different matchup in retrospect. So this performance definitely solidified my how I feel about Usyk at heavyweight, and certainly alleviated a lot of my concerns about him not being able to handle huge guys. But either way, we've had a ton of predictions going out prior to the fight. Kyle actually chimed in on this special occasion to offer his own prediction. And what did you say in the article? How did it go? First of all, did it go according to how you described it?
We say this all the time. This is something which you and I talk about quite a lot, Tuman. But analysis is not about getting the prediction right. It's about getting the ebb and flow right, about getting the narrative of the fight right, about getting the nuts and bolts of the styles clash right. And in that respect, I think if people look at my prediction, I was pretty much correct. I was incorrect on how I felt the decision would go. I was incorrect in the sense, I thought
not even the British judges could fuck this one up.
Of course. I was slightly incorrect in the sense that I felt that Usyk would have to wait a little bit longer before pressuring. But he did take the front foot early. So I was wrong in that regard. But I believe the way I put it was that the hand traps, feints, and foot speed would cause Joshua to basically unravel as the fight progressed. And he would just have enough breathing room to end the fight on his feet. And that's basically exactly what happened. The hand traps are actually really important. Obviously, the GIF or the GIF, if you're that way inclined, that's doing the rounds on Twitter the most is Usyk using his lead hand to bat down Joshua's right hand and then launching the left over the top. And that's the kind of thing I envisioned happening. Essentially, Usyk did exactly what I thought he was going to do. And as we alluded to, he's quite good at this boxing thing. So he actually exceeded my expectations. And they couldn't rob him. Not even the English could rob him. And we are probably the worst, as anyone who watched the rest of the card, in the world for bad decisions. So it's kind of testament to how good Usyk is.
Yeah, before we get into this whole British judging and British boxing sort of talk, Lukasz, what was your prediction, and did the fight go according to your prediction? And what did you get right, and what perhaps in what way you were wrong in retrospect?
My prediction was quite narrowly focused. I talked about two things specifically that I thought Joshua was going to start to struggle with. I predicted Usyk KO, but the two things I predicted Joshua would struggle with was I thought he'd have a problem with Usyk turning and level changing at the same time. I didn't think Joshua would be good at doing. He can do one thing or the other. I didn't think he'd have to do both, and I thought that would be a problem. And when I was watching some of Joshua's fights back, leading up to my prediction, I noticed I thought he was really bad at defending shots coming from a low down that come over his jab or around his jab. And I think 10 seconds in, it was about 10 seconds in, Usyk came in behind Joshua's jab, ducked to the right and hit him on the left, coming up underneath it. I was just like, okay, I think I've done okay there. The thing I didn't predict, I didn't talk about bodywork, so that was a bit of a miss. But that went both ways, because Joshua also worked Usyk's body quite well, and Usyk had to react to that, and that didn't come up in my prediction at all.
If I may, actually, one thing I noted in my prediction was that Joshua's not much of an adjuster, and whilst I would still agree with that generally in terms of he wasn't able to come up with alternate strategy throughout the fight to combat what Usyk was doing, there were little things he did that I didn't give him credit for. For example, he couldn't establish his jab, which I said in my piece as well, that Usyk would take that away. So his usual arsenal wasn't really available to him, because Joshua builds a lot of things off finding range with the jab, sort of mid-range power boxing style. But what he did was quite cleverly, he adjusted to throwing a sort of right uppercut to the body. Usyk took that away in the end by basically negating that by pivoting out to his right. But Joshua used that quite effectively for a couple of rounds. And one thing I'd love to do, obviously, started out as a Usyk loving, which I'm sure people are tired of on Twitter, but it's great fun. But I really would like to sort of, I'm sure we'll get to it, but give Joshua some credit as well, because although he is big and stiff, as we all assumed him to be, he's not quite the big stiff idiot that Tyson Fury once proclaimed David Price to be. He's just not quite genius level intellect in the ring. So people assume now that, oh, well, Usyk's better than him, so Joshua's shit. And that's not really the case. Joshua probably showed more for me in that loss than he did in his win over Andy Ruiz, where he was seen as touted as some great adjuster for just being rather negative.
Is that what happened? Is that what happened? Did people really say that?
Yeah, I think people did say it. I mean, obviously myself and Lukasz wouldn't have said that, but yeah, it was very. Joshua's proven himself that he can, and basically just grabbed and ran for 12 rounds.
The Matchroom followers in the UK, you're clearly not hooked into the UK boxing Twitter, because
thankfully, yes, I avoid that. I avoid that side of Twitter and social media as a plague, because I actually saw what Kyle used to do in his spare time. He would just sit there for hours on end responding to absolute idiots on Twitter.
I mean,
and there was no end to them.
I was doing that this morning, yeah.
Just hundreds of them.
I'm back. Usyk's got me back. I said, actually, after today, we've had a victory parade from Saturday night to Monday. It's you win the Super Bowl and you go out on the bus and you go around town and you wave at all the fans. And that's basically what myself and also Fight Site alumni Ollie have been doing. But today, we're recording this on Monday, so just a day or so after the fight. And after today, I'm done with it. But yeah, I have been enjoying. I'll be honest with you, I think people think that I chill sort of dunking on idiots just for the fun of it, but it's not. It's a case of it's really. I think it's quite an interesting sort of experiment to, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in the second half of our discussion, to sort of illuminate how little people actually understand what they're watching. In particular, we've seen it come out with in regard to Joshua's tactics or alleged lack thereof, which I totally disagree with. So I'm sure we'll get into that in time. But yeah, that's my main gripe. Not so much no one giving Usyk a chance or people saying that he wasn't very good, because that's not really the case. It's more a case of those now trying to rewrite the narrative as to why he won that fight.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, he lost, that means he's shit, or he must have been off during the night of that fight. He wasn't himself, that kind of stuff. You don't really have to shit on one fighter to explain why the other fighter won. The other fighter may have just been better, just flat out better. That's literally it.
If he'd done this, he'd win easy. not understanding why you can't just do this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's a guy on TikTok who does fighter impressions, and he most commonly he does impressions of Conor McGregor. And like for the last several fights in a row, he's been posting the same video of him mimicking the Aldo KO and going, if Conor McGregor has just done this, he'd have won his last several fights. And that's not how it works. That's essentially what you're doing. You're essentially just pretending that somehow a fighter is going to magic out a win, out of nowhere, despite never showcasing the quite the adjustments needed for that particular fight or preparing in that specific way. Because preparation is key here, and that's the reason why Usyk won. But
there's an awful lot of people going basically, oh, Joshua should have fought like Chisora. Joshua should have used his size and his strength and brought forward. And it's just that's just not. It's never, even when he was aggressive against Klitschko and the like. That's just not who Joshua ever was. He's never used his frame. He's never been a sort of a physical bully. He just can't. He was never going to do that. Like Chisora's main thing is he doesn't give a fuck.
There's one thing to point out, a possible route to victory, and say, perhaps if the fighter were to adjust in this particular way in camp several months ahead of the fight and perhaps come up with a certain style adjustment that would allow him to win the fight. But it's not going to happen mid-fight unless that fighter is literally one of the greatest fighters ever. That's that's what all-time greats do sometimes. It happens. Sometimes they magic out a win out their ass in the middle of the fight, but I mean, that's a tall task for anyone, and it proved to be much too tall a task for Joshua in this case. And it's not. I
think the issue is perception as well, Iggy. I think people have this perception, especially in England, where Joshua was brought up as this is built up, to be this kind of destroyer of all men. You know, he's just going to come in there and destroy everyone. You know, he's like a 6'7" Mike Tyson. And inherently, he's not. He's a self-conscious, mid-range power boxer who needs timing, needs his space, needs to build a rhythm, and reacts terribly.
Right. Let's just let's just sort of zoom out a little and settle down and try to explain what we're trying to just convey here. Let's just zoom out and evaluate Anthony Joshua as a fighter before we get into discussing the actual fight itself. I interrupted you there. You started actually explaining what Joshua does, so please go back to that. What is your evaluation of Joshua as a fighter?
My evaluation on Joshua is basically that he is a confidence fighter. He is somewhat of a bully, but not in the sense that people want him to be. I think people want, like Lukasz was saying, they want him to sort of use his frame to dig in and bully guys and get them out of there. I mean, Joshua is a bully in the sense that he doesn't like it when he doesn't have everything his own way and he folds. And inherently, the issue with everyone wanting this tactical shift, this strategic shift, is that he doesn't have the inherent character to pull off that sort of game plan. For any fight site listeners that are MMA fans, if you consider Brock Lesnar, you know, he was an absolute monster until he realized that people would hit him back, and then he didn't like it anymore. And since the Vladimir Klitschko fight, we saw a different Joshua where he became a bit more cerebral and a bit more thoughtful. And subsequent to the Ruiz fight, we saw a guy that not just became more thoughtful and cerebral, but I would say more timid. Lukasz, I don't know if you agree with all of that, or if you've got any of your own opinions on him.
I mean, my rather cheap way of framing it is that Joshua is a lot more like Callum Smith than his fans want him to be. He's he's got his skills and he's got his talents and he's got his gifts, but he needs to have the tempo the way he wants it, and he's not that good. He's okay. He's still a world level fighter, but he's not that good at setting the tempo the way he needs it. He needs his opponents to be afraid of him, or at least wary of him. And if they don't, then he starts having problems. And that's pretty much goes with what you're saying about how he doesn't seem to have the confidence in himself to really just go, okay, I'm breaking it now.
Yeah,
I'm breaking it now.
What we mean by that, if you go back and watch the earlier fights in Anthony Joshua's career, people talk about how he was a finisher, how he was more aggressive, how he was more sure of himself. But one crucial moment here, it was against a different level of opposition, first of all. So that level of opposition allows him to showcase different facets of himself in a more, well, basically without much issue. That's that. If you once again, for the MMA viewers, if you look at someone like, for example, I don't know, Calvin Kattar, who spent much of his career in on the regional scene, just murking. Well, that's actually kind of a bad example, because Calvin Kattar was a decision machine on the regional scene.
True,
Yeah.
which is weird.
Yeah, but then when he got into the UFC, he started finishing dudes. But basically what the concept I'm trying to convey here, if you look at certain fighters who have a lot of success on the regional scene and then get into the UFC, suddenly their style changes. Perhaps suddenly they have to be more conservative. Suddenly they have to be more wary of the other persons, of their opponent's skill set, and that's basically
they drown.
Yes, and that's essentially the case here. And not only that, but also there was this mid-career adjustment post that Klitschko fight, where Joshua got dropped hard multiple times in that fight. And certainly you could see him realizing that, if I take a shot like that, I go out. I may go out. I fall down. I fall flat on my ass. It's unpleasant. It hurts. And he was certainly a testament to his character that he was able to get up still, but it took a lot of mental power out from him. And comfort is incredibly important in fights, and comfort with getting hit, comfort with realizing that perhaps if I do everything correctly, I still may get dropped. That's one of the most important attributes to have at the elite level. And that's where Joshua competes now, at the elite level. And it's not like, people talk about how he's not all that right now, that he's a fraud, that he's all sorts of very nasty shit, but he was still able to get to the elite level. He competed with elite opposition. He was able to beat some of them, and Usyk just proved a bit too much. That's all there is to it. You don't have to look into it. It's not every fight has this sort of like behind the scenes kind of thing going on. Everyone wants champions to have the same drama in their lives that Mike Tyson did. Perhaps I find that with modern boxing fans especially, like they always talk about how perhaps he wasn't motivated, perhaps there's some kind of like personal issues going on behind the scenes, there's some fuckery going on behind the scenes, and that's not always it. More often than not, it's just a question of skill sets versus skill sets.
You get the same, like Joshua himself was sort of the beneficiary of this, of that sort of fan thinking, like Carl knows what I'm talking about, with Vladimir Klitschko and the relative performance versus Tyson Fury. And even now you still get people telling you that the Vladimir Klitschko who fought Anthony Joshua was a better fighter than the one who fought Tyson Fury. And it's like, he just fought a better opponent that was harder stylistically for him. And Joshua,
even if you're iffy about grading fighters on a linear scale of skill versus skill, matchups still matter. Skill sets still matter. The interplay between skill sets still matters. And it's kind of like, it's kind of aggravating how we have to explain this over and over again from title fight to title fight to title fight. So I guess I understand why Cal spent so much time dunking on idiots on social media now, because it actually is very aggravating.
If I could use an analogy just to sort of break it down further, or just in a pithy way for those that are maybe not quite getting what we're saying, I'd say if you open Joshua's toolbox, it's a lovely big red toolbox, multiple layers. In the top, he's got a lump hammer, he's got a hatchet. Lovely. That's the big tools. You take the top layer out, there's no chisel, there's no spanner, there's nothing there to break the stuff down. He's got the brute force stuff, but he hasn't got all the stuff that can tie it all together if shit goes wrong with what he's working on. If you look at Usyk's, everything's in there. He's got everything you could possibly need, and therefore he can approach a task in many different ways. All Joshua can really do is smash something up, and if the task requires a more delicate touch, he's not the man for the job.
And it's a very interesting analogy, because that would some people would think that, oh, you mean that Joshua is a brawler, but he's not. He's not a brawler.
No,
It's just that his.
you need the chisel. You need the chisel. Sometimes you need to wear it down first.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, Joshua always liked to these mid-range engagements and working behind his jab. And so far, it kind of served him well, except against Ruiz. But that one was also a very aggravating one with regards to fan reaction, because everyone talked about how he's not himself and that kind of stuff. But I mean, Joshua, it's very easy. A small, compact guy with fast hands, a fat guy with fast hands who is very potent in the pocket, got inside range of Joshua's long arms and banged him out. That's literally it. That's all there is to it. It's not that deep, much like Joshua's toolkit.
Yeah.
Nice.
Even Povetkin, he beat Povetkin convincingly in the end, but there were times when Povetkin was coming in underneath that jab and giving him trouble. It's just a weakness of his, which I think me and Kyle both sort of got into in our predictions for Usyk, because we should talk about Usyk a little bit.
Yeah. Now, the hero of the occasion, the hero of the day, Oleksandr Usyk. Perhaps, definitely the greatest cruiserweight in boxing history, I would say. Would you agree with that guy?
David Hay.
David Hay. Shut up.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
It's between, just a quick aside, it's between Holyfield and Usyk, but if anyone says that, they're technically two different divisions, because Holyfield was the 190-pound great, and then cruiserweight moved up to 200 pounds. So essentially, they're the greatest. 10 pounds is a significant amount of weight. I would say they're basically the greatest of two different divisions that share the same name.
Yeah, and now well on his way to cement himself as one of the great heavyweights, not the greatest, but one of he's up there certainly, and it's a very interesting style matchup, because we talked about how Joshua struggles against guys who are very potent in the pocket, who have big power and are smaller than him and shorter than him, or at least able to navigate that exchange of ranges. But Usyk is, first of all, he's shorter, he's more nimble, and his style isn't the type of style where he kind of like weaves under the punches and comes up with hooks. He doesn't do that. He's one of the purest boxers in boxing, essentially. That's what he is. He follows that very Soviet mold of an outfighter that is very potent on the back foot, but is also very potent in most ranges, and he uses straight punches to get in close and get in range, and uses straight punches even well within range, where you would think that hooks would be the tail would dictate the exchange, but he doesn't do that. He uses 1-2s, he uses constant in and out movement. He works on the outside, works off the back foot, works wonderfully off the back foot, and he was able to utilize that style against a rangier guy who is taller than him and ostensibly carries more power, and he basically dominated him at every range using that style. And most people would think that, if Joshua were to press the issue and come back to his former banger self, he would win. But that's not what happened. And even if he did, I don't believe he would have had much success either. But yeah, please recap the fight as you saw it. Who would like to be the first?
I had it to you, Lukasz. You can go first.
Okay, on the spot. I think it's fair to say Usyk started faster than probably most of us were anticipating, because it's one thing we always say is Usyk starts slowly and builds up. And I think even one of the things that Joshua was surprised by was that straight away Usyk was taking so much initiative. Even when he wasn't throwing punches, that's Usyk's thing: his feints, the hand traps, everything he can do to take his opponent's reads away. He was doing that at full volume straight away. I think he even said post-fight that from the off, he was trying to knock Joshua out, and then his coach had said, no, wind it back a bit. And we saw, him coming back to the boxing and finding the little angles. Then the middle of the fight was that was when Joshua got his that was when Joshua showed his best side. When Usyk, he actually made this is where Joshua needs to get credit, because he made Usyk work for his lunch, work to find his angles, which I think both of us said we weren't expecting that to happen. So we thought if Usyk was going to have trouble, it was going to be navigating the range and Joshua's timing, and it turned out he did in the end have trouble coming inside and coming around for a while, and then Joshua got tired. And even since he learned about it in the Klitschko fight, Joshua doesn't tire well. So once that happened, it was over. Like he's not a good 12-round fighter.
He's not very adept at fighting tired. He doesn't feel comfortable fighting tired.
It doesn't look like someone who drills fighting with fatigue. And once that happened, it was over, really.
And Usyk is one of the most supremely well-conditioned fighters out there. His conditioning is insane. His stamina is insane. And his ability to maintain that composure and discipline when well into the later rounds of the fight is second to none. But Kyle, how did you see the fight?
So I thought I was going to have a heart attack for much of it, because even as an analyst, you guys will know that there's only a couple of fighters I actually feel emotionally invested in, and Usyk's one of them. But more than that, it's almost like an arrogance thing, where for years I've been telling people that Usyk's going to batter Joshua. If he loses, I basically look like a fucking idiot after years. So there's a lot riding on this kind of fight. I didn't think I was going to watch it. I was having heart palpitations. I was sweating, much to the chagrin of the people I sat with. Bless them for putting up with me. But Usyk took the initiative early, like Lukasz said, took centre ring. And I'm assuming the game plan was to basically just keep moving Joshua back, because unless Joshua's stepping into his jab and getting his power punches off, he hasn't really got much. So kept forcing him back, just little touches here and there. Got his attention early with the left straight that you spoke about earlier, Iggy. With the left straight that made Joshua go, right, okay, this isn't going to be a walkover. Now, as soon as Joshua knew it wasn't going to be a walkover, he plummeted in terms of his confidence, in terms of his output, in terms of his energy. Everything about him just changed. Like you say about the mid rounds, sort of 6, 7, or 5 and 6. Like Joshua, he was unable to build on it much because, as I said earlier, he relies on the jab to find his timing and range. But he was able to start timing with some nice right straight counter punches and some single right leads, just firing them off with no tail. Really nice. Then Usyk took that away, and then Joshua came up with the body shots. Like you guys said about not fighting tired, there was a point when Joshua went to throw another one of them big right body shots, and he was so tired. It was like holding the R2 button in Fight Night when you've got no stamina and just throwing a haymaker. Usyk stepped back and he looked like a carnival boxer, and I thought Usyk's pissed this. Like the rounds where Joshua really could have done something, Usyk just circumnavigated him. What was really interesting was as Joshua's left eye sort of closing, Usyk would offer him a jab, pivot to the outside angle, and then turn it into like a hook, and just peppering him, just touching him, and Joshua didn't react well. And then in the 12th round, well, my cousin and I were just saying, please stay away, you've won this fight. Usyk just manned him and just didn't seem concerned. There was a point where I think it was in the 12th round where they clinched up, and this is one of the things I'm sure we'll get to, the narrative that people are trying to profess online, but Joshua clinched up and Usyk literally didn't wait for the referee to separate them. He untied himself and pushed Joshua halfway across the ring just so he could keep battering him. And that's why I just don't really get the whole, Joshua could have done this, he could have done that. Usyk was the far better man, as you guys said, at every single range.
Yeah, it's kind of like basically Usyk both. First of all, he outpositioned Joshua soundly for the entirety of the fight. He constantly maintained dominant positions, both the outside angle with the lead foot planted outside for the first several rounds, and then with the inside angle where he would sort of angle inside and pepper off hooks and throw the very interesting rear left hook from southpaw stance. Well, he fought southpaw throughout the fight, but just to give just to explain what he did. And what's especially impressed him is that he also out-chinned Joshua. The man has got a beard on him. some of those right straights would have knocked lesser fighters dead.
They have.
And they have. Like,
Yeah.
if you go back and watch that fight, some of those, you talked about how Joshua would adjust and start firing off these very quick lead rights right off the bat with no setup, and some of them connected, and some of them connected very well, right on the point of the chin, and Usyk just tanked them. He would just sort of like tank one, take a moment, like, all right, back to business as usual, with no issue. He wasn't wobbled. He wasn't concerned about them. He just sort of like put them in the back of his head. Oh, I have to be sort of like mindful of them, and that's it. And that sort of composure and durability is just at this level, at heavyweight. I mean, we all knew that Usyk is a very durable fighter when we saw him tank some of Gassier's power shots, but
then you put 40 pounds on top of that, and you think, is it going to be the same? I just want to ask you something quickly, Lukasz. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. A lot of people, and you might have noticed this online yourself, Iggy, people saying, oh, when Usyk was purely on the back foot, Joshua seemed to have more success. And I'm very much of the theory that when you speak about those shots that he took, that would have deaded most people. And Usyk took a moment to readjust. And maybe I think it was in the 6th round, he did like sort of get on his bike for much of that round. Possibly it was that round. It was around that time of the fight. Joshua seemed to have more success tracking him down. And I think that's where this false narratives come out about, oh, if he did that all the time, it would have been easy. Do you think that there's any truth to the idea that Usyk was willing Joshua on, forcing him to chase him as he got himself back together? And why do you think it was that he had more success in what we've all agreed was a surprise to us on the front foot as he was? Usually we would expect, oh, he's going to be a pure boxer. He's going to move around. He's going to move backwards and out jab Joshua. And actually, some people have noted that Joshua seemed to have more success when Usyk was going exclusively backwards.
Well, the answer is very simple, and that's taller Ranger, more powerful fighters should have more success pressing forward. It's even taught in Soviet boxing theory, interestingly enough. And Usyk
having the higher ground.
Yeah, and Usyk should be mindful of that. I assume he knows that. And one of the things that he did well, he had the most success when he was sort of egging Joshua on and then stepping hard forward and intercepting him mid Joshua's step in, and
exactly.
Then he would angle off. He wasn't just coming backwards. And then when he got peppered with some of those body shots, which was a nice adjustment on Joshua's part, but he should have started with that, with body shots. You always want to start with body shots. It's not just something that you sort of like pull out of your ass mid-fight and then suddenly the fight is going to go your way. It's not going to happen at the elite level, at the very least. And yeah, about Joshua's rounds to victory, like early on, I think I recorded an alternate commentary for that fight, and you can access it on our Patreon, on the Fight Side Patreon. But early on, before the fight started, I said that Joshua is should probably look for uppercuts to the body from the start, and he did sort of like come to that idea, but it was kind of a little too late for him, and Usyk just sort of kind of navigated that problem as well. But yeah, where the fuck was I going with this? Goddamn. Fuck.
We were on the Usyk's chin when I interrupted you
Usyk's
last.
chin, yeah, and we
were talking about outboxing, Usyk boxing on the back foot, and whether Joshua was at his best when that happened.
Yeah,
that's where you took up the narrative.
How much of it was a choice? Yeah, how much of it was a choice of Usyk to give away a round, or was it a choice to lead Joshua on? Because what you found was there was a very brief period, 5, 6, 7, 8, where they sort of each took turns to win a round.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was just plain sailing one-way traffic. And the reason I'm tying it in is because your point, Iggy, about Usyk just being a fucking Iron Man. He's the kind of guy that goes, you know what, I can let him do a little bit. I can let him build a bit of
Perhaps.
momentum. I
Yeah.
could let him
That
tire
could
himself
perhaps
out.
be,
I'd have to
a conscious
rewatch.
decision.
Yeah, I'd have to rewatch the fight to know for sure. But I think the impression I got watching was that the rounds that Usyk did back off a bit is one where he took a shot early, and even though, like, as we said, he took them well, he was like, okay, I need to take some time to figure out what Joshua is doing, to see what he's throwing, and then I can get back at him. And then so he'd take up the rest of the round to have a look at what Joshua was throwing, and then the next round he'd have figured it out, and then he came back strong. So I think it wasn't necessarily Joshua forcing him back, but it wasn't like a deliberate choice to pull Joshua onto things. I think he was taking the time to work out what was happening, and then, okay, I'm not taking the risk. I'm going to concede the round, but not be in so much danger, and then I can come back again and take away the weapon, whatever he was throwing at me.
I mean,
So what you're saying is there's nuance to this. There's nuance. It's not just, oh, he could just come forward and throw punches like I've heard so much in the last 2 days. It's actually, boxing is a nuanced sport. I'm really surprised
it's almost like you have to think about what you're doing to win fights.
Or think about what you're watching.
Yeah. But yeah,
Can we address the elephant in the room then? Because it's annoying me, this whole thing of, I mean, you guys have seen I've been through it, but you've alluded to it, but I've had it still today, which is, if Joshua just walked forward, he would have won that fight easy. It really hurts getting punched in the face. And you don't want to just walk forward and get punched in the face if you're a fighter who's inherently anxious.
I mean, they also presume that Usyk won based purely on points and pitter-patter shots, and he didn't. He wobbled Joshua multiple times. He nearly put him out at several moments in the fight. When you get it's that rear hook that I talked about. Usyk would slip to the outside of Joshua's lead shoulder, and then loop that rear hook in and spin Joshua's jaw around. When you get your jaw spun like that, do you think you're gonna want to go forward and probably take more of that, especially when you're not as comfortable taking shots like these, like Joshua is? Do you think that? I mean, fucking come on, people. Some people just need to get punched once. It's what I think. It's my firmly held belief that it's beneficial for everyone on earth to get punched at least once, to at least understand what that feels like before they speak about combat sports. Fuck's sake, Jesus.
Do you think there is anything that he can do, Joshua? Do you think there's anything he can do to combat?
I don't think that, I've been talking about this online a bit as well. I don't think there's nothing that I don't expect to be picking him next fight, but there are things I think he's capable of doing that would make it harder for Usyk. But he needs to be a little bit more aggressive, but he needs to be spoiling Usyk's movement. He needs to be doing things that slow Usyk coming.
The most important thing is that he has to turn with Usyk.
Yeah.
He shouldn't just follow him around.
I think he's too stiff to do so though.
Yeah.
No, the thing I mentioned, and it's not as simple as it's not as simple to do it as me saying it. I think he needs to use his lead foot more to take up Usyk's space, because Usyk could basically, once Joshua had taken a step, Usyk could basically do whatever he wants. Like, Joshua's feet aren't mobile. So once he'd taken the first step, then Usyk knew, okay, his foot's there, I can go wherever I want. And I feel like Joshua would be capable of then taking another little step, and then Usyk has to sort of take himself out of shape then to get around, in theory. And obviously that's a bit risky because it gives Usyk more space to move into around the back. But if he can push Usyk out of shape, he's taking the sting off his shots, even if he's in position, in that kind of thing. And also he needs to interrupt Usyk's movement more, because one thing that I noticed quite interesting about Usyk's movement was he's turning Joshua both ways, but when Usyk stepped around to hit around to Joshua's lead hand to his right, to his own right, he came really tight. But when he came around the other way, he looped out really wide, and he wasn't really throwing. He wasn't really looking to attack down Joshua's lead, which obviously a sensible, fairly basic thing to do. But I think if Joshua figured out a way to throw more hooks and intercepting shots as Usyk stepped around him, then Usyk would have to look for more routes on the other side, and that would give Joshua more it would give Joshua more opportunities to use his not his bulk, because like we say, he's not good at using his physical bulk, but just to use his size to disrupt.
He didn't get the lead hand going. The lead hand.
Yeah.
Can you guys recall any good moments with Joshua jabbing, maybe one or two, left hook non-existent?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Usyk basically reduced him to a one-handed fighter.
Yeah. He took away the lead hand very early on with his feints and his constant head movement. Like none of the jabs that Joshua threw connected. None of them connected well at the very least.
It's like a double-end bag. You're second guessing. You can't. It's moving. You can't land. But not when you're a big stiff fighter like Joshua. Fantastic.
I mean, that's the problem. Is Joshua's never been that good a jabber. He's got a decent jab, but it's fairly one-paced.
Nice hard jab.
Yeah.
It's a hard jab, it's a hurting jab, but it's not a nuanced jab. It's not a very educated jab.
Yeah, and there were a lot. There's what I can't remember which round it was, but there's a GIF or clip where Joshua sticks his jab out and kind of leaves it there, and then basically he can do absolutely nothing, and Usyk's basically doing whatever he wants, and Joshua can't see it because his jabbing hand is in between Usyk and himself, and that happened quite a lot.
And basically, we said in the beginning, Usyk took the initiative from Joshua at the start. He took it from him with his foot positioning, with his feints, with his hand trapping, and with his head movement. It was a combination of things. It was just textbook, a masterclass in initiative, basically, from the start and up until the end of the fight. But yeah, and one thing is that when Joshua jabs, he kind of like Usyk very deliberately made himself a smaller target and a very uncomfortable target too. And most of those jabs were connected. If they connected, they glanced off the gloves most of the time. And Usyk was very mindful of making sure that whenever Joshua jabs, either jabs to the side and kind of interrupts his own balance, just kind of like messes with his own balance by jabbing, or jabs downwards so he can't see the shots coming from underneath. And he maintained that positioning for the entirety of the fight. That kind of composure is kind of, well, first of all, it's kind of insane, this sort of composure and discipline, how well coached and how well trained a fighter can be, but also it just explains why Joshua hasn't been able to fire off anything aside from his right hand, because he didn't really have many setups. He doesn't really have any setups outside of that 1-2 and perhaps the occasional uppercut, and the left hook was non-existent, as you said.
I mean, Usyk as well. You talk about the variants of the jab. He had the up jab. He had, like you said, coming over the jab. He pivot outside and then I say turn it to a hook. He was able to come inside Joshua's jab and shoot the up jab. He was able to feint the jab and then he kept shooting the left cross or left straight to the solar plexus.
Oh yeah,
which I was a bit wary about. Oh, if you keep doing that, that's when Joshua's going to drop the left hook in, but it never came. But like you say about no nuance in Joshua's jab, he always aims for the head. He doesn't aim for the shoulders, aim for the chest. You say that Usyk makes himself a smaller target. The body's always larger. Even if Usyk stood side on, he should have been either just trying to hook his lead shoulder, jabbing him in the chest, all these different things that he could have done. And Joshua basically just went, well, I can't land my jabs at the head, so I'm just not really going to throw it. Yeah. It doesn't mean that, again, I want to stress, he's not shit. He's still really good. He's one of the top 3 or 4 best heavyweights in the world. He's not at that level. And people just assume, because they've been told by the Matchroom Media Machine and Eddie Hearn, and they've been in this gang of Joshua fans online that have been smelling each other's farts. And then for the last couple of years that, well, Joshua's meant to be the best fighter in the world. So he'll just figure it out later and he'll go back to being the best fighter in the world. And what we've discovered in this fight in particular is that he was never the prince that was promised. It was not the muscular Adonis from North London. It was the Joker from Ukraine. That was the one, or possibly the crazy homophobic gypsy from Manchester. But more likely than not, now I would say Usyk is the main man.
Yeah, there's. I kept when I watched the fight, I kept thinking about, like, if Joshua were to throw a left hook to the body now, he would interrupt. He would at the very least interrupt Usyk's lateral movement, but it never came. I thought about that. I thought that perhaps he kept throwing this very weird, like very ugly uppercut Joshua did. That came at like a 45-degree angle and had a massive backswing. It's like he was trying to sort of like do the Marge Simpson uppercut, and obviously it never connected.
Yeah, if he was more agile, he could have done a Shoryuken from Street Fighter, but he's not agile enough to actually do a 360. So he just sort of does the Marge Simpson.
Yeah, and I said that Joshua should keep turning with Usyk, but if you go back and watch the fight, you see that Joshua's feet are constantly tangled up. He's constantly tangled up in his own feet. Whenever Usyk moves, whenever he tries to follow Usyk, his footwork just isn't there. Yeah. He's not very.
His guard is rigid. His guard was really rigid at times. He looked like a novice in there.
Yeah.
There's something I mentioned on Twitter earlier, so some people might have seen this. One of the differences between them is whenever Joshua's stance, he's always looking to have the exact same stance, the exact same frame coming from his feet, but he always wants to be the exact same distance apart, everything. And Usyk, every time he steps, if he takes a step left and then back right again, to theoretically the same position, his feet are slightly different, and that just means everything he's doing is slightly different. And Joshua didn't know how to handle that because he is always exactly the same. And to a certain level, that's a good habit to have. But once you get to these elites, you need to have these little variances,
little wrinkles in your game, little tiny little tools that sometimes you need to pull out when a chisel won't do. It's like when you get to the elite level, the margins become thinner, the margins become smaller, and the tools that you need to navigate certain matchups becomes it's kind of like goes down to the very smallest tools. So, but
I think one of Joshua's flaws has always been, and this probably comes from his camp, but it might come from him, is he focuses so hard on clean technique, on clean mechanics, because he is very good at throwing. It's all something you could put in a textbook, but you compare him to Tyson Fury. Like Tyson Fury's jab is hilarious, it's ridiculous, and everything he throws just looks so silly, but he's got so many different ways of doing everything that his opponents
also disguises.
And with Joshua, you just know what's coming at you. Like if you're a good enough fighter, you know what's coming at you and you know how to react. And Joshua has proved not to have an awful lot of he can adjust the timing, he can adjust little bits of range, but he doesn't adjust angles, and he doesn't adjust like the patterns. So I think that was his big problem, and probably what
you guys have both raised interesting points that have literally made me think about fighters of Joshua's ilk. What you guys both said about nuance and in terms of wanting to look a certain way and the way he fights. If you look at other fighters of his ilk, what I would say, like you say, Lukasz, textbook boxer puncher types. Your Joe Lewis, your Ike Williams, your Alexis Arguello, Lennox Lewis to an extent as well. So we're not just, I just don't think we're being prejudiced to larger bodies and going, oh, well, of course he can't do those things because he's 6'7" and 17 stone. Lennox Lewis did them. He doesn't have a process of framing, of throwaway punches. He doesn't have a process of what all of those guys had also, which was a great inside game. So when it's not working at jabbing range, you can at least change it up. You can at least make it so you can, like Lewis was a brutal inside fighter, same as Arguello, Lennox Lewis and Joe Lewis were both brutal inside fighters.
Basically the ability to leverage your physicality. He doesn't have that.
Of course, but also your style. Mm-hmm. He wants to be this pretty textbook boxer puncher type. But if no one's scared of all your other tools, they'll just take that away. The thing is with Usyk, he's not scared of any of it. He was not scared to get down and dirty on the inside. He's not very great at it. I think he kind of lacks he has now for clinch fighting and a want to fight on the inside, but he's not really. It might be his arm length. It could be a number of things, but he's not really great on it. He's great just inside of mid range. I wouldn't say he's a great inside fighter in the way that a great Mexican Julio Cesar Chavez or someone like that is. But he's willing. Joshua just looks helpless in a way that all those guys I mentioned earlier did not. And they all had issues, like you said, about footwork, Lukasz, and they could be outmaneuvered and outboxed to an extent, but not in the way that Joshua is, not in the way that you felt that they would never be able to gain a foothold into the fight again. And I'm not so sure. How old is he now? 31, maybe. I'm not so sure how much else he can learn to go to the next level. There's nothing wrong with that. He's still really good. He'll achieve more in his life than probably all three of us combined in terms of monetary success and fame and whatnot. But as an elite level heavyweight boxer, I think we've seen basically all he's got to offer.
Like, I think I don't know if he will move to change coach. I think he could do with changing coach, but it'll improve certain things. I don't think it could improve certain things. I don't think at this age, I don't think he's capable of improving enough to beat Usyk, really. Like, he could always catch someone who punches that hard, even with Usyk's speed, could always potentially catch him and knock him out. But he isn't going to improve enough that any of us are going to be picking Joshua in a rematch. Even if he does change coach, there are little things he can do that another coach would be teaching him to vary his jab and little things like that. But I think it's too late to really build subtlety into his game from the ground up.
Joshua is, I don't know, this may be I'm veering back into my old armchair psychology habits, but Joshua strikes me as a person who cares entirely too much about his public image. He cares entirely too much about how he looks there in the ring. He cares too much about how he comes across to people. He doesn't, what a fighter should actually care about is what he does. And then that image builds around the fighter after the things that he does first, and not his process is kind of backwards in the respect that Joshua goes into the fight with an idea of how he should win. He visualizes himself winning and the approach that he should take to win. I'm going to look like a pretty boxer. I'm going to throw straight punches, and I'm going to 1-2 my opponent into oblivion. Be the great heavyweight everyone wants me to be. When that's not necessarily the correct approach against any given fight. Like, it's not a fighter-specific approach, is what I'm saying. You should think about the matchup. You should think about what tools you should bring. You should have at this level, you should have a wide array of punches that you can do, that you can throw. The variations in punches, the variations in foot positioning to throw those punches, the variations to outposition and outmaneuver your opponent to corral them into a position where you can knock them out, and not try to will this scenario into existence where you throw the textbook punch and for some reason it connects. It's as if your opponent is a heavy bag. They're not going to stand there and let you do that kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter if you look ugly, as long as you're winning. It's not the concern here. But it seems to me like Joshua is very concerned about looking impressive rather than actually doing impressive things. I mean, it's a very damning statement, but I don't think it's purely his fault, because he's so surrounded by media all the time, and he's so media whipped by, and he sort of lives in fear of the media around him, and it's not really his fault, being knowing the UK media and what sort of stuff it says at any given moment about public figures, like. That time when he appeared on that Black Lives Matter protest, I think the media basically eviscerated him. Was that the case? Unless I'm mistaken.
Yes, actually, what you get is he said something like, I don't know if it was in support of sort of Pan-Africanism, but he sort of said, look, we should be supporting local black businesses because people might not use them as much as they would white businesses, or there aren't as many of them. And afterwards, he appeared on an advert, I think, for Deliveroo. And you see a lot of people online saying, well, don't use them if they're not black businesses, though, right, Anthony? Insinuating that he's some sort of black supremacist. tying that in. So it's more like the average Joe on the street rather than the media. But yeah, he gets hit with that stick all the time. I think he's genuinely a decent guy. I think when you talk about perception, he's very media trained. Like he come after the fight and said, "Yeah, I want the rematch. There's things I'd like to do, but the better man won." I don't think he believes that. I also think in terms of perception, like you say, Iggy, I think he is terrified of being sparked out. I think he considers that some sort of slight on his image. Like we say, after the Klitschko fight, he didn't want to get hit like that anymore. In the Ruiz fight, he kind of was happy, seemed content to be stopped on his feet. And in this one, this is kind of ties into the so-called tactics for Joshua going forward. Even if he did try the pressure, one big shot, and he's going to go, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, because the more I do that, there's more chance of me getting knocked out. And I think he was quite content to not get knocked out against Usyk, not take as many risks. And Usyk didn't really let him off the hook. He just walked up to him and beat him up in the end. So yeah, Joshua, I think he's a generally decent guy. I don't think he's a complete phony, but I do think he's calculated in the image he tries to give off. This is all armchair psychology, isn't it? But one thing's for sure, although there's obviously a very, very nuanced discussion that we won't have about Usyk and his beliefs, because it's a totally different discussion. I think Joshua is kind of easier to get a grasp on how he feels than Usyk, because I feel like Usyk doesn't give too much away. He seems like this clown, but in the ring he's a very intense guy. Joshua, he seems cool, calm, and collected, but in the ring we see a guy who is the opposite of that once it isn't going his own way. He's quite easy to fluster.
It's kind of like not to shit on Joshua, and we spent most of the podcast trying to protect Joshua and his skill set and trying to defend him, trying to steel man his side of things. But when you contrast Usyk and with Joshua seems like a public figure first and a fighter second. With Usyk, it's the other way around. There is some clownery going around with his public image. He's a goofy, fun-loving guy, it seems. And knowing that what he tends to say in Russian, I saw a bunch of his interviews. He's just kind of like a normal type of salt of the earth type of person. But
that's good to hear.
Yeah, but
he is an Elon Musk superfan, though. It turns out that's not good.
He is.
Should we make a joke? Should we make a joke now, Iggy, or do you not want me to make that joke? Because I didn't realize he was a big fan of yours. But you know,
for fuck's sake,
one of your biggest pet peeves.
I'm going away for a piss. Just fuck you.
We'll keep talking about he's not here. I knew you would like that one. It's because his girlfriend just left him. Yeah, so Grimes, that is not his real girlfriend. Yeah, I think I've got. What do you think about him as a person, Joshua? What do you think?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say. Yeah, like both of you said, he's so media trained. It's I think in real life he's probably, like, sometimes you see flashes in interviews of him. He's got more teeth than he shows in public in real life.
Agreed.
But in real life and in the ring isn't the same thing. And they feed into each other. But I'm not even sure if he cares. I mean, I'm not sure if he cares about being knocked out for the image, because he's I don't think it hurts him more being flat on his back than it does what happened against Ruiz, where everyone decided he was a quitter. Well, not everyone, but quite a few people decided he quit for some reason. But yeah, he doesn't like. I don't think he likes to be seen taking damage. And I mean, I think he also just doesn't like taking damage. But I think the two things tie into each other. It's hard to say which is which. But
Frank Bruno didn't react well to getting hit, but he stuck in there. He tried. He would try. He would be rigid. He would freeze, but he would try. Joshua seems happy to skirt off. Iggy, now you're back. A quick question for you. You've spoken before about the difference in perception with fighters speaking in English and not. And I believe the examples which I've heard you speak about before are I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, so I'll say it in my bastardized, Romanized way, which is Petr Yan, and of course Gennady Golovkin. But you would say that Usyk does not follow that trend of fighters from similar regions that come across totally different in their native tongue as they do in the English language.
No, I mean, for sure, but it's more like the way he carries himself in his native language is kind of like an extended look at what he does when he's in the English-speaking world, when he's under scrutiny from the English-speaking world. It's not like he's completely different. No fighter that you've described comes across as completely different from the image that he tries to portray overseas. It's more of a more limited, more stereotyped look, because they know that it's going to sell. They know that the grim post-Soviet types sell very well in the West, because there's a lot of fetishization going around, a lot of this kind of like stereotyping going around, like, oh, these people are built different, they're so stoic, they're so grim, they grew up in a gulag and that's why they're so great. that kind of shit. But Usyk is more like Usyk is kind of boring, honestly, to describe, because he's just kind of like a normal, fun-loving dude. That's literally
I think the perception of him in the West is that he's a nutter. He's got these crazy eyes. He seems like a funny guy, but he's badass, like in terms of like he's a nut job. I think that's how people perceive him. Like, this guy's crazy.
He does play into it. He understands that it's what makes him popular overseas. He dress up as the fucking Joker, for fuck's sake, for the media thing. But over here is just he's kind of witty. He does have his moments of joking around and saying pithy lines here and there, but overall, just your regular run-of-the-mill, outgoing, like extroverted type of person who is have fun at parties and that kind of stuff. Yeah, life of the party and that kind of stuff. But that's it. Nothing really. Well, he's a very devout Christian, I suppose, for one, but that's not very common. That's not very uncommon. So not very remarkable, really.
Yeah. Well, I'd say one thing: he might be run of the mill as a person, but personality-wise, rather, not as a person, personality-wise, but he's not very run of the mill in the ring. He is absolutely spectacular in a way that you rarely see. I think people don't really understand. I just want to sort of wrap up my thoughts, unless you've got anything to ask me, guys. But you don't see fighters like this regularly, even at the top level. I don't even get this feeling with Canelo. It was seen by many as to be the best pound-for-pound fighter of his generation. Canelo is superb. He's a fantastic fighter, but there's an aura around Usyk in terms of the way he operates that you see very, very rarely. And he just strikes me as a special talent.
He's a consummate professional, is what I would say, in his approach, because even with elite talents, there's a lot of idiosyncrasy to them. There's many odious personalities in the fighting world. There's been hundreds of them over the years, but a lot of them have their weird quirks that affect the way they fight. Usyk doesn't have that. He always fights according to how the coaches told him to fight. He's supremely disciplined. He never strays away too much from the game plan. He never does stupid things. Like he never does dumb shit like trying to showboat mid combinations. He just goes about his job, really, and and he does it extremely well. And it's actually more special than the listener may think in the fight game.
It's something that me and our fellow fight site writer Taylor have talked about before, is that we both agree that they're both trained by Papashenko. We both agree that Lomachenko has the better overall technical skill set than Usyk. But like looking at this fight and others, Usyk, like you just said, Iggy, Usyk never flaps, he never deviates, he never steps off his game plan. Whereas, okay, he's had some. I think the Lopez fight was harder than anything Usyk's had as a pro, but even in other fights, even against Linares, even against Linares, sometimes Lomachenko, you see him getting annoyed. You see him, he tries to do the perfect thing and it doesn't work, so he gets angry. And Usyk it just doesn't happen. It's just he's
unflappable, really.
Yeah.
In any
the
situation.
word I was going to say. He's unflappable. He wouldn't have lost the first 6 rounds to a fighter like Lopez, regardless of weight. Usyk would have taken the initiative. Lomachenko was flappable. He did think, well, I've got to give this guy. Just how I predicted Usyk would be in the Joshua fight. I thought it might be quite similar to that in terms of he'll feel the power early and go, you know what, I'll wait till this guy tires. But no, he didn't care. He just stepped to him, took the initiative early. And I know what you're going to say, Lukasz, in terms of the conversations over Taylor, because I've been privy and part of some of them, in terms of Lomachenko having a more sort of fleshed out skill set, shall we say. But for me, this will probably be the last thing I say in this. It's Usyk all the way. I think he's the better fighter. I think he's the more proven fighter now, and I think he's the best fighter in the world.
Yeah. I mean, there's no arguing he's more proven now. Like there's like even with the skilled advantage that we all knew he had coming in, doing that to a guy that much bigger, it's you can't argue with that. It's special.
Yeah, like paradoxically, even though Usyk is the hero of the occasion, it's kind of like, it's funny because his performance was so perfect and so textbook. It's kind of like you don't feel like you should really try and explain what he did right, because everything he did was right. You can't really pinpoint a singular moment and say, oh, this was a cool adjustment. This is a cool thing he did. Everything he did was pitch perfect. Very rarely you see performances like these. It was a special performance. And even though I would very much like to just try and break down everything that Usyk did right piece by piece, it would take an entire day, and I'm not exaggerating here. Everything he did was right. And
better to give a general flavor of what he did.
Yeah, it's kind of like better to sort of zoom out a little and explain the big picture
rather than break down the ingredients. Yeah,
and the primary points, as always, the things that he did right. The ring craft was always on point. He always knew where he's going to be in the ring relative to Joshua. He always knew where he needs to turn to corral Joshua into the positions that he wants him to be in for him to fire off his offense. He never let up on the initiative. The initiative was maintained throughout the fights, even when he wasn't firing punches. And that's important. That's a sign of a very elite fighter, because even when he wasn't firing punches, the little things he did, the little slips, the little feints, the little nods here and there, they all basically rendered Joshua passive, because he didn't understand what Usyk wants him to do and what Usyk wants to do himself. He was constantly wondering. And the defense, of course, always there. Constant preemptive head movement, constant giving off different looks, not letting Joshua decide not giving Joshua a static target, turning with Joshua, all that kind of stuff. Just a perfect performance, even if Usyk did get tagged a little bit, a couple times to the body and to the head. But
it was a really good fight. Well, we haven't said that. We haven't said that.
Yeah.
It was actually, it might have been generally one-sided, competitive.
Overall one-sided, but Joshua still had moments of success, and Usyk was able to navigate those moments of success. It was actually a fight. That's what's so impressive about it.
It was a good fight. I enjoyed it.
I sort of said on Twitter that it wasn't a masterpiece because he got tagged, and it's like,
don't get me started.
Yeah, it's because he was fighting. He was fighting. It was a more challenging fight than Gassiev. It wasn't. That doesn't necessarily mean Joshua's better than Gassiev. I think they're probably similar skill levels, but Gassiev is smaller than Usyk and Joshua is bigger, and so that made it harder, and that makes the performance. Even though he took more damage, for me, it was a more impressive performance.
tells me that that person in question just doesn't understand fighting, and perhaps either never trained or never watched too many fights.
Iggy, that
very
person has
thoughtfully.
20,000 more followers than I do. It's not fair, really, is it? I mean, I'm not thinking that followers equal popularity, but I like to think people care more about my takes than those fucking shit ones.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, fucking PewDiePie is still immensely popular. The fucking there's probably like a 6-year-old with 25 million subscribers that's
True.
than either of us. So like, fucking, I don't even try. I don't even think about it. It's kind of like, it's kind of the case of thinking that millions of flies cannot be mistaken. There's probably something to shit. There's something.
That's a good one.
There. Yeah,
that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, fucking just back to the fight.
Yeah.
Like, what makes a fight and the performance more special is if the fighter in question had like a hurdle to overcome, and Usyk had to overcome many different issues, and Joshua actually presented an interesting threat to him. That's what fighting means. It's a fucking fight. There's two people trying to knock each other's heads off, and Usyk and Joshua tried his best to knock Usyk's head off, and Usyk just didn't let him. And that's what makes this performance so special. If you think that the performance has to be pitch perfect and the hero of the day doesn't have to get tagged a lot, I think you may find a lot of cinema boring, and basically the history of human art and media, the entirety of it, the whole fucking, even back to the cave paintings where cavemen are hunting fucking deer and like woolly rhinos and shit, you won't find them interesting, because even in those fucking cave paintings, there's people dying in there to those animals. That's what fighting is. That's what struggle is. It's all about struggle and overcoming struggle with ingenuity and passion and toughness and grit and all that.
Yeah. I think some people's idea of a masterpiece has been misadjusted because by thinking of Roy Jones beating James Toney, but it's like not everything.
Or Floyd Mayweather's sort of later welterweight career. The whole, you have to win 12 rounds and not take any punches for it to be a masterclass. When like you guys, like you just said, Iggy, like the fact that he overcame a little bit of adversity and managed to keep it with just a little bit of adversity is what people, like, for example, you'll see people saying the same about Rigondale versus Donaire. Oh, it can't be a masterclass because he got dropped. And it's like, he got dropped by the most lethal pound for pound puncher of the generation, got up and beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, it's like you took your opponent's best and gave it 10 times better, and that just elevates you in my eyes. That's what I look for. That's what I look for in a fighter and in fights. Fighters adjusting, overcoming, solving problems.
We had two in the same night. It was a good this past Saturday, the 25th of September, 2021, was great across the board for seeing just that. In
Volkanovski, Ortega. Jesus Christ.
Of course. So
fucking hell.
So as fight fans, all three of us, I would say, Lukasz, you're probably a little less known for it than myself and Iggy are, but I would say all three of us have been described as varying levels of cynical. It's weekends like this that sort of reinvigorate your love for combat sports. And for me, if anyone's seen that I've been more active on Twitter in the last couple of days, it's because this performance by Usyk just made me feel like a fan again. Gave me something to be happy about, and long may it continue.
Yeah, just this entire weekend was a bit of a reminder why we still do all this, why we still watch this, and why we were drawn to the sport in the first place.
Got me back on the analysis videos, got me back on the pod.
That's saying something, because Kyle said to me multiple times before that he's done, that he doesn't give a shit. There's nothing there's nothing that can bring him back. Everything's shit. Everything sucks.
Yeah.
It was really
Why
Lawrence
live?
Okoli. Like he was pretending it's Usyk, but it was really Lawrence Okoli. That
It was
kicked
Lawrence
him.
Okoli fight. You're right. Yeah, it was the Lawrence Okoli fight. Right, and now, no, I'm joking. No, but no, and it's great. It brought us all together for this great chat.
Yeah, and like before we go, just brief thoughts on what's next for Usyk. What do you think?
Well, I've got a
The
theory,
upcoming
guys. Can I
matchups.
jump in my theory? Everyone says the Joshua fight's done with. The Joshua Fury fight's done with. They're going to the zone. They're leaving Sky, Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua. That is. They've got a rematch clause with Usyk. Joe Joyce has got a mandatory coming up. Tyson Fury probably retain the WBC and ring titles against Wilder. They're still more likely to make any more money out of that. Do not be surprised if coming off a loss, Joshua's a little bit easier to do business with, and Joshua fights Fury coming off a loss rather than rematches Usyk and scuppers any chance of that fight ever happening. I would not be surprised if both of them sidestep Usyk to fight for the rest of the baubles, and Joshua versus Fury is next up, assuming Fury comes through Wilder unscathed. So for Usyk, I would suggest that his next fight might not be the Joshua rematch, or might be, because he doesn't have a deal with Eddie Hearn anymore either. Usyk, that was the last fight in his deal. It might well be that his next fight is a mandatory defense against Joe Joyce. Lukasz, what do you think about that theory? Bullshit, or am I onto something?
You might be onto something, but I think Joshua's
He thinks
probably
it's bullshit. He's being polite.
I think Joshua's got too much pride. I think he wants to fight Usyk again, like he did with Ruiz, and I'm not sure his confidence has been dented enough. But he might want the money. Like he might decide, okay, I can fight Fury first. Usyk will always want to fight me because I've got the draw. So it could happen.
I'm currently picturing Anthony Joshua in like a CEO's office, and in like a big office like at Disney, and there's an army of marketing managers around him, showing him graphs. Your statistics with this demographic are falling down. Your statistics with that demographic are going to go up if you fight this guy. If you if you show up on this interview, on that YouTube show, on that TikToker's video with 35 million subscribers who is 17, you show up there and your numbers are going to go up with that demographic, and they are going to buy your merch. Like I just think about it, and just it makes me think that he'll, in a roundabout way, perhaps Kyle could be right, because this tactic could make him more money. Yeah.
I mean, I also think that at the end of the day, I don't think that even losing to Usyk twice will put the fight off forever. Like I think it will delay it, and it'll be less interesting again when it happens. But the young upcoming fighters, I don't think any of them are good enough to pose a challenge to Fury so long as Fury is going. So he might as well take the best draw, which will still probably be Joshua. It's not going to be Efe Ajagba or Hrgovic, and it probably won't be Dubois either. So even if he loses twice to Usyk, then he'll fight someone else. He'll regain a bit of momentum, and then he'll still be the guy that will get the most people in to fight Fury. So I think we'll see that fight happen eventually, whether it's next or in 2 or 3 years.
And honestly,
it's a bit like Pacquiao Mayweather. It needed Pacquiao to lose and not have as much bargaining power for that fight to finally happen.
Yeah.
And I think if Joshua loses again to Usyk, I think people will be less interested. I honestly do, but also think it might be easier to make.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of not interested in seeing Fury versus Joshua. Really, kind of know how it's going to go.
Yeah, it's not going to be competitive in any technical sense, but
like the only fight I'm interested in seeing is Fury versus Usyk, because I actually think that Fury is going to give him lots of trouble in most areas of the fight.
Listen, I don't want to go into this, but can I just ask a simple yes or no to you guys? Do you guys, either of you guys, I'll start with you, Iggy, do you have a firm, just simple yes or no, do you have a firm idea about Usyk versus Fury would go?
I have an outline in my mind how it perhaps could go. So yes, basically.
Okay, Lukasz, do you?
I have an idea. I think I know the pattern of the fight, but I have no idea who's going to win it. Like, I've no
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree with both of you in terms of I've got an idea, but No, and that's why it's compelling. Joshua Fury, that's a straight up battering. That's a mugging.
Oh my days! Did you see Roy Jones Jr. after the fight saying, "Oh, we've got to prevent Fury ever fighting Usyk because it'd be really boring."
I love how Roy Jones is just
Talking
brutal,
about-
and everyone's like, "Roy, please stop talking," because he's just like, "No, he's shit. What's he doing? He's
It's like
shit."
after the fight, Joshua like collapsed on his stool. He was like completely exhausted, and Roy Jones was like, "What the fuck are you doing, Anthony Joshua? You fucking mug, stand up."
Yeah.
You look like
Yeah.
shit. You melted like a puddle of shit. Stand up, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
And he's like yelling into the mic.
Roy was like picking Usyk before the fight as well. He was saying like, "You guys better not count him out." And Josh Taylor was the same. He was saying like, basically they forced him to sort of be committal, and he kind of said Usyk and the Sky guys looked mortified that Josh Taylor dare have an opinion. That he's kind of looking at everyone going like, "Have you guys actually watched Usyk? You seem pretty, you seem to think it's going to be a walkover." They're like, "What do you think there, Josh?" He's like, "Well, I don't really know." They're like, "What do you think, Josh?" He's like, "I think Usyk probably do him." And it's like, everyone in Sky team's just like, "Fuck, why have we invited this guy on?" It's fun though, isn't it? It's fun.
Fucking media.
Great fight.
I mean, I guess I understand them because they have to sell the idea that the fight is going to be like that the outcome is not decided and the fight is going to be very interesting and competitive and all that kind of stuff. But come on.
Yeah, I mean, Fury's just gonna. It's not competitive at all, Fury Joshua. So yeah, Fury Usyk would be great. I mean, there's a chance that happens if Usyk signs with his best friend Vasily Lomachenko with Bob Arum, because that's who Fury signed with. But we all know that Bob Arum is also the great procrastinator when it comes up to setting up super fights to two members of his own stable.
Which
He's
is very
so bad
odd.
at his job. He's so bad at his job now.
Very odd,
really
considering that he's also ancient.
Yeah.
One would presume
Yeah,
that you would like to make more money while you're still fucking
Yeah.
alive. Bob Arum.
Or just put together good fights to watch. Like, if I'm going to die soon, they give me the best fight I could possibly see before I die. But Bob Arum's like, what we'll do is we'll milk it for another 10 years, so I never get to see this fight. It'd be like, reading, I don't know, a great epic like A Song of Ice and Fire or One Piece or something like that, and being given the chance to see the ending and say, no, I'll chance it that I might die before I get to see the ending of this narrative I've been following for decades. And Bob Arum's very much like that. He had Gamboa and Juan Manuel Lopez famously all those years ago and just never put the fight together. And if he gets Usyk, there's a massive chance that he'd have them both fighting their mandatories for 3 more years, and they might slip up. But that's still probably the best chance we've got to see in that fight, because I don't think Fury fancies it. But that's just me.
And I think Fury will take it because he's been pretty open that he needs the biggest challenges to keep himself from going into a depressive spiral. Like, that's his thing. It's like, I need to fight opponents that might be able to beat me, otherwise I'm just going to get bored, and when I get bored I get depressed. So even if
he's very dismissive though, he's been very dismissive of Usyk over the years, very dismissive,
very
too
odd
small.
also.
If you
that's odd of him. I don't understand why. Just and his statements, his kind of like chauvinistic statements about how the heavyweight champion should always be English and that kind of stuff, or British or whatever.
from the Western world, very bizarre. Like if the Soviet states were not limited to amateur boxing for 50 years, that we might have had a great Soviet state champion before, but because we never had that, it should always be an American or an Englishman now. Bear in mind that the English aren't exactly known for their great heavyweight boxing champions. It's been basically dominated by the Americans for decades upon decades, with a couple of exceptions. So I don't really know what Fury's on about there, but it's a weird one. But I'm sure
Fury is
Fury.
Fury loves to say things. He just loves to talk. Loves the sound of himself talking.
Guy,
But what do you think? Have we pretty much exhausted the topic, or is there something you would like to point out that you forgot?
I think we've exhausted it, but it was pretty fun.
Yeah, I kind of expected it to be a sort of like a meandering, messy sort of discussion, because it's more of about our impressions. It's not really like a super organized analysis that I sometimes do.
What you're trying to say is that we are not we are not super focused dudes who are going to go hone in. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that we at least broke it down into sections.
Yeah.
This one. It got a bit shaggy dog at the end, but in terms of actually breaking down the fight, I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
It's
fine.
Analyzing fights that haven't happened and analyzing fights that have happened.
It's fine. It's just 3 friends talking about fights, and I think this one warranted it. I think it was a breath of fresh air for me because with the UFC schedule and with the schedule of fights, sometimes it can feel robotic. You're just kind of going through the motions. So the fighter X brings a Y to the table, and fighter Z will do that. This is how the fight will go. This is how the fight went. All right, moving on, next card. And this actually felt like something that I have an actual impression about. It's something that I actually.
I mean, it was a big difference to me when I was doing my previews of this fight. There was a fairly obvious difference in the way I did it, in the sense that I've done quite a few previews in the last few weeks for the fight site. I've been reasonably good at keeping up a schedule of putting out previews, but almost every
consistent.
Fight. Yeah,
if I do say so myself, compared to our previous output with regards to the boxing team on the fight
I
site.
decided, like I said, once I moved here and then I fixed my internet, I decided I have to do something about this. And but in every card there were some really good cards there. There were some fights that I was really interested in talking about, but I had to look up almost at least one of the fighters in almost every matchup. And in this card, obviously I did watch tape on Fury and Joshua coming into it, but I already knew what I thought was going to happen, and that's because I've been invested in both fighters, and it's such a big fight. It's just an occasion, right? It doesn't come around very often.
Yeah, that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And looking forward to another appearance in about perhaps 2 years.
Well, yeah.
With the way that boxing fights happen, with the way they are set up, and how everything works.
Wilder's going to knock out Tyson Fury, and then we have to talk about that.
Oh, fuck that! If that happens, I'll come back on next couple of weeks, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Yeah. Wait, how long until Fury Wilder? Actually,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake, Jesus. Huh. Forgot about it. Like the thing with the UFC is sometimes you don't know when the fight will happen, because there's just so many of them, and they kind of get lost in the sauce. And with boxing, you kind of sort of stop yourself. I consciously try to stop myself from thinking about when the next boxing fight is going to be on, because it takes so long for them to happen. And they kind of catch me off guard by surprise. But yeah, either way, this was a fun one. Thanks for joining me, fellas. Always nice to have a chat. Perhaps if something interesting happens in 2 weeks, we can gather around once more. But for now, thanks for the talk. Thanks for your input, and see you next time. Looking forward to repeat appearances. I'm not gonna plug everything now. We've talked for quite a while now. If the listeners are still here, just subscribe to our fucking Patreon and listen to the alternate commentary I've recorded. Listen to all this stuff. $3 per month.
Twitter.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter.
Follow me on Twitter. No one likes me.
Follow Kyle on Twitter if you want a good laugh. If you want to see him just eviscerate a bunch of idiots. As always good fun. And the links are going to be in the description and all that kind of shit. And go away. This is the end of the show. That's enough of that. So fighting is fun sometimes. That's all. That's it. All right. Yeah. Bye.